Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Today's talk is on a series of the great Imams, and 2 weeks ago we talked about Imam Abu Hanifa, and today inshallah we have with us our guest speaker, Imam Abdul Malik Sheikh, and inshallah his topic will be on the life of Imam Abdul Malik as well. So I'll just pass over to him inshallah.
Bismillah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala al-mab'uthi rahmatan lil alameen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd, my respected brothers, elders, assalamu alaikum. First of all, apologies on behalf of Dr. Abdul Hakim Vasquez, who was supposed to take today's session. He's more of an expert when it comes to Imam Malik and the Maliki Mazhab. He's Spanish by origin, and he studied extensively in the Middle East and North Africa. And his PhD was on the foundation of the Maliki Mazhab in Spain. So he would have been a good person to really cover this topic, but unfortunately, due to some unforeseen circumstances, he was unable to attend today. He does give his apologies. And I have been asked by the organizers to cover this topic. So far, can you hear me? If you can hear me, inshallah, I think the sound is okay. If needed, I can raise my voice a little bit. So far, you must have heard about, or you have definitely heard about Imam Abu Hanifa, who is the most senior out of the 4 great Imams. And today we want to talk about Imam Malik, rahmatullahi alayh. Imam Malik is, of course, just like Abu Hanifa himself was a great man, Imam Malik was one of the great scholars of Islam, Sheikh, a Muhaddith, an expert in the prophetic tradition. And he's referred to as the Alim al-Medina, the scholar of Medina, or the Alim of Dar al-Hijrah, the abode of Hijrah. Medina is often referred to as Dar al-Hijrah because this is where the Muslims migrated to from Mecca. And he was so well versed in hadith and in fiqh and in the sciences of Islam that he excelled all of his peers. And in the presence, while Imam Malik rahimahullah was alive, in his presence nobody gave fatwa. So this is his high standing, Not to say that they were the scholars, it doesn't mean that the scholars who were around were incapable, but this is the awe they had for Imam Malik, and they respected his knowledge, and they looked up to him in knowledge. So about his name, he is Amir al-Mu'minin fil Hadith. He is the commander of the faithful in Hadith. This is a title that is given to somebody whose knowledge of Hadith is so deep, so vast. Like Imam Bukhari is referred to as Amir al-Mu'minin fil Hadith. We don't have people like this in our time. But he was, of course, Amir al-Mu'minin Hadith. And his name is Malik, his full name is Malik ibn Anas ibn Malik ibn Abi Amir ibn Amr ibn al-Harith ibn Ghayman ibn Khuthayn ibn Amr ibn al-Harith. And he is from the tribe of Asbah, known as Al-Asbahi, is a tribe in Yemen. So his origin is actually from Yemen, but his forefathers, his grandparents, they had come, great-grandparents had come and settled in Medina al-Munawwara. So his father, he is Malik, and his father's name is Anas ibn Malik. And you shouldn't be confused. Some people might get confused with the name, because we know that there is a companion called Anas ibn Malik. This is not the Anas ibn Malik, the companion of the Prophet, though one of his great-grandfather was indeed a companion of the Prophet, we will come to that, but it's not Anas ibn Malik. Anas is his father, whose father's name is also Malik. So sometimes with the name people get confused. especially when you're learning hadith and you're learning isnad, there are people who have similar names. You might even come across in hadith chain many people whose names are Umar, and even Umar ibn Khattab. And we shouldn't think that there's only one Umar ibn Khattab or one Anas ibn Malik or one person that's in, that's why we need to be very careful when we actually, study these subjects. We shouldn't wrongly claim someone to be someone else. His grandfather was Abu Malik. And he's obviously, his grandfather, great-grandfather, is Abu Amir, and he was a companion. He witnessed many of the battles of the Prophet with the Prophet ﷺ, except for Battle of Badr. So, one of his great-grandfather was indeed a companion. And his at the time of Imam Malik rahimahullah in Medina al-Munawwara, Medina was the center of the Khilafah, Islamic Khilafah. And he was born during which era? Does anyone know? He was born in the year 93 after the Hijrah. And that was obviously, I think, still the Umayyad was still ruling. Okay, the Umayyad were the rulers. Though during his lifetime, it all changed. Later on, it was the Abbasids who came to power, replacing the Umayyads. And of course, Medina was not only the center of the Khilafah, but it was also it was the center of knowledge. Many ulama, many of the companions were there, and there were many teachers, direct students of the companions who Imam Malik rahimahullah had studied from, and it is an established fact. I know the 7 most famous fuqaha of the tabi'een. Imam Malik rahimahullah took knowledge from every single one of them. This is something that was quite that he was most fortunate to have. And it is said that he took knowledge from about approximately 100 persons until he became the most learned person of his time. And people used to come to him from all parts of the world because he became such a great scholar and people got to know about him. And this is at a time when you didn't have this kind of mass media, internet, television, satellite TV, whatever. But still people was speaking about this great scholar, Malik ibn Anas. From among his shuyukh, obviously we mentioned the 7 fuqaha, but there were also others who he took knowledge from, like Nafi'. And Nafi' was the mawla, was the slave of Abdullah ibn Umar. Abdullah ibn Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhuma. And he took from him. Likewise, he took from Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, from Abu Zinad, from Abdul Rahman ibn al-Qasim, from Ayyub al-Sakhtiyani. And Ayyub al-Sakhtiyani is probably one of the non-Madani scholars, because he was not from Medina, he's from Iraq. But he trusted him a lot. Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari, and Aisha bint Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. Aisha, the daughter of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, and others. So from this, we also learn one very important thing. I think Brother Abdullah Hassan, I think, was the last tutor. He probably had mentioned to you that Imam Abu Hanifa was a junior tabi'i, a tabi'i who met a companion of the Prophet ﷺ. And a lot of the historians say that Abu Hanifa was a tabi'i. If not, he's definitely a tabi'i of the tabi'i. Tabi'i means a student of the companions. Likewise, Imam Malik, though he was definitely not a tabi'i, he did not meet any of the companions. However, he met many of the students of the companions. And some of the teachers, the famous 7, are among them, and Nafi', and here we've got Aisha, the daughter of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, who was a companion. So even the female at that time, unfortunately today we don't give any importance to our sisters. Female scholars had existed in our history for many centuries, but now we don't see much of that because the men started to deprive the woman of playing their role in knowledge. You know, they think that women are only there to cook food and that's it, and make babies. So Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi, he took from the scholars, and then he also took from some of his knowledge from some of his peers. People from all parts of the world came and took knowledge from Imam Malik, from Hijaz, from Iraq, from Yemen, from Egypt, from Syria, from Andalus, from Spain. And because of his deep knowledge and his accuracy, you know, he was so deep and he's so accurate in his knowledge and narrating of knowledge, that even later on some of those who were his own teachers started to take knowledge from him. For example, Imam Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri took from Malik, and Imam Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri was one of his teachers. So the teacher takes from the student. In recent time, I can think of an example like this when I think of Sheikh Abdul Malik and the late Sheikh Mustafa al-Zarqa, rahimahumullah. Mustafa al-Zarqa was from Syria. He was a very well-known faqih, usuli, and he was one of the teachers of Sheikh Abdul Malik in fiqh. And Abdul Malik was, I think he was 5 years his junior. He was more specialized in hadith. Okay, so Sheikh Mustafa Zarqa later on took knowledge of hadith from Sheikh Abdul Malik. Okay, and you know, this shows the humbleness of these people, the humility of these people. Sometimes, you know, he's younger than me, I know more than him. Why? Because I'm older. Okay, we feel embarrassed to ask somebody who's younger than us in age, or somebody who might have been our student, but then later on they went to different places and they became much more knowledgeable than us. Why should we feel embarrassed to ask these people? You know, Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, being one of his students, a teacher, he wasn't embarrassed to take knowledge from Malik. Likewise, Rabi'at ibn Abdul Rahman, one of the 7, he was among the teachers of Imam Malik, and he too later on took knowledge from Malik. Likewise, Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari, Musa ibn Uqba, Hisham ibn Urwa. These are from his shuyukh, and they also took knowledge from Malik. This is how deep Imam Malik was. Even some of his peers who were with him seeking knowledge, they also took knowledge from him. Like Sufyan al-Thawri, Abdul Malik ibn Jurayj, Imam al-Awza'i, al-Layth ibn Sa'ad, Sufyan ibn Uyayna, and many others, including Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayh. Imam Abu Hanifa, he benefited from Malik, from the knowledge of Malik, and likewise Malik ibn Anas, and I'm sure you've heard this in the last session, Malik ibn Anas also benefited from the knowledge of Abu Hanifa. And this is from the humility. You know, we think that Imam Abu Hanifa probably couldn't tolerate Malik and vice versa. No, it wasn't like that. They disagreed. Some of the scholars that I've mentioned here, like Layth ibn Sa'ad, he had lots of disagreement with Malik, but they had the respect and love for each other. And you can see this in the correspondence that took place between Layth ibn Sa'ad and Malik ibn Anas, you know, despite their many disagreement in fiqh. But today we've lost this you know, characteristic. We think that when we disagree with somebody, we have to hate the person. You know, I disagree with you and I don't like you. You're wrong, I hate you. Okay, so when I disagree with a particular person, I will not only talk about the thing that I disagree with him on, but I will go on and talk about some of his, you know, personal traits. Or this person, you know, he wears pink trousers, whatever. I don't know. He starts making issues out of non-issues. Okay, in this country, very often in our workplace, in school, university, we're always told that we should, if we disagree with something, we should challenge. You know, we have the right to disagree. And the way we should do that, they say that we should challenge the opinion and not the person. And I think this is, though it's coming from the non-Muslim, this is a very Islamic thing. Because this is what Islam teaches. When we disagree with somebody, we disagree with the opinion. And then, you know, not the person himself. So when we challenge somebody, when we refute somebody, we don't refute the person himself, but we say that, I disagree with such and such thing that you said. So this was how the relationship was with Imam Malik and some of his peers. Now what did the scholars say about Imam Malik? Just to show you how much the scholars valued this great Imam. Sometimes we forget. We think that Imam Malik was a person that came and went. Imam Malik, people like Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Awza'i, and the many scholars, we shouldn't think that they just, they came about by chance. You have to understand that these men were chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is because of the contribution of Malik, it is because of the contribution of Abu Hanifa, we know what. They have made the religion easy for us. Imam Malik was the first person to compile books on Islam, on Islamic sciences. Not just the Muwatta, he has other smaller books as well. Okay, if Imam Malik did not gather the hadith, if you go to Bukhari and Muslim, a great deal of hadith. In fact, most of what is in Muwatta is in Bukhari or Muslim. You'll find them, the hadith. So before Bukhari, there was Malik. And that is why Imam Shafi commented on the Muwatta of Imam Malik that the most authentic book after the book of Allah is the book of Malik. And he's true, because most of the hadiths are authentic and most of the hadiths you will find in the Sahihain. Now what do the scholars say about Malik? And there is a hadith which is narrated by Imam Tirmidhi, Ibn Hibban, Al-Hakim, Ahmad and Nasa'i, in which the Prophet ﷺ said, "Yushiku an yadrib an-nasu akbat al-ibl, fala yajiduna ahadan a'lama min alim al-Medina." A time is about to is almost coming when people will strike on the livers of camels in order to seek knowledge. And this is basically what he's trying to say, that people will be so much dedicated to seeking knowledge. This is talking about the seriousness, the distance they will travel in order to seek knowledge. There will be, it requires a lot of juhd. And obviously they will be riding on camels. So it's not that they will be literally striking on the livers of camels. He's trying to refer to the manner in which they will be riding in order to seek knowledge. فَلَا يَجِدُونَ أَحَدًا, and they will not find anyone أَعْلَمَ مِنْ عَالِمِ الْمَدِينَ, and they will not find anyone who is more knowledgeable than the scholar of Medina. Imam Tirmidhi, after narrating the hadith, has a hadithun hasanun sahih. This hadith is hasan sahih. The hadith is also narrated by the scholar Abdul Sana'ani, and he said, كُنَّا نَرَى أَنَّهُ مَالِكٌ وَلَا يُعْرَفُ هَذَا الْإِسْمُ عَالِمُ الْمَدِينَةِ لِغَيْرِهِ. He said, it was our opinion that this hadith refers to Malik, because there is no one other than him who was referred to as the scholar of Medina. It was only Imam Malik, or even up to today, when people mention Imam Malik, they say Imam Dar al-Hijrah, the Imam of Dar al-Hijrah. They don't say this about anyone else. Many people had come before, after Imam Malik, and even before him. Because Malik ibn Anas, he was referred to as the Imam of Medina, the Imam of the Prophet's Mosque, the Imam of Dar al-Hijrah. And also he said that there is no other scholar. Abdul Sana'ani said there is no other, people never travel to seek knowledge from no other scholar except Malik. This is how people used to come from faraway land, like I said, from Yemen, from Sham, from Syria, from Iraq, from the west, from Andalus, from Spain. Likewise, Hamad ibn Salama said, there are many other scholars who have also said the same thing. And Hamad ibn Salama said, if I was asked to choose an imam from whom people can take knowledge from, and if I had no choice but to choose somebody, then I would have chosen Malik ibn Anas radiyallahu anhu. And about his knowledge of hadith and the people that he narrates from, Yahya ibn Ma'in said, لا تبال أن تسأل من رجال مالك كل من حدث عنه ثقة إلا رجلا أو رجلين. Now don't bother about asking about the people from whom Malik narrates from, because all of them are thiqah, all of them are reliable, except for one or two people. So this is the Muwatta, and this is really how the Muwatta is. Except for one or two hadith may be questionable, but generally all of the narration there are authentic. Imam Shafi'i radiallahu anhu also said that if a hadith comes from Malik, comes via Malik, then accept it, hold on to it with firmness. Don't, you accept it, because this is how much they trusted him in his knowledge of hadith. And of course, Imam Malik was somebody who was never, also another characteristic of Imam Malik is that he will never hold back knowledge, and he was never afraid of speaking the truth, even in front of the khulafa. Many people used to come to his circles. He had many students. Once the Abbasid Caliph Harun al-Rashid came to him in his mosque. And by the way, Malik ibn Anas never left Medina except for Hajj. So he never left Medina. The only time he left the Prophet's mosque and then he was still then teaching in his house is because then later on he suffered from this condition, continuous urine drops, and he didn't want to be in the mosque in that state. So, but he never left Medina other than for Hajj. Now Harun al-Rashid he came and he had requested Imam Malik radiallahu anhu to go to him. Okay, where were the Abbasids based at that time?
Baghdad. Baghdad.
Yeah. So that's where he was being requested to go, basically, to the palace of the Caliph to teach his children. Now these days, some of our shuyukh, if they were, not all of them, I'm not generalizing, I know some people, if they were made a similar kind of offer, they would just run. Yeah, it's an opportunity, money, whatever. Everything is money now. Money, fame, I'll become the sheikh, the great sheikh, the whole ummah will, I already have fame in Medina, I become even more famous when I go to Baghdad. Now what did Imam Malik say? Imam Malik radiallahu anhu, when he heard this, he said, A'azza Allahu Amir al-Mu'mineen. In a very nice way, he said, without using harsh language against the Khalif. Okay, sometimes we think that to speak the truth, we have to be harsh. What are you on about? You stupid man. I'm the scholar, and you're the ignorant person. He said, A'azza Allahu Amir al-Mu'mineen. May Allah honor the Amir al-Mu'mineen, the commander of the faithful, the Khalif. In هذا العلم منكم خرج. This knowledge spread because of your effort, because Abbasids, they played a great role in preserving the knowledge. And before them, of course, the Umayyad did also play a role, particularly people like Umar ibn Abdul Aziz and a few others. But knowledge became, and they really honored the ulama. So he said, it is because of you that the knowledge has spread. فَإِنْ أَنْتُمْ أَعْزَزْتُمُوهُ عَزَّ. Now if you continue to honor this knowledge, then it will be honored. وَإِنْ أَذْلَلْتُمُوهُ ذَلَّ. And if you start to humiliate this knowledge, then it will become humiliated. Respect the knowledge. He's trying to say that knowledge needs to be respected. And it is not a respectable thing to do, to ask an alim to go and teach your lazy boys in your palace. Send them here. What did he said? وَالْعِلْمُ يُؤْتَ وَلَيْتِ. Knowledge is taken, it's not given. You have to go for it. Knowledge requires traveling. You have to strive. You have to go to the shuyukh. Now we want the sheikh to come to us, to my house, come and teach me. We want to bring them from the Middle East. We want to bring them from different cities to London, to East London, and teach us in our house, in our masjid. But we don't want to travel. So he said, if they want to study. Now, how was Harun al-Rashid's reaction when he heard that? He said, Sadaqta. He said, you're right. He accepted. And then he ordered his son, Al-Ma'mun and Al-Amin, to come to the mosque of Imam Malik in Medina, to the Prophet's mosque, and study with Malik. But what did Malik say? He made a condition. Because both Ma'mun and Al-Amin were both princes, weren't they? Yeah, their father is the Malik, the king, and they're the two princes coming. So he made a condition, the son of the Khalif. So if they come, make sure that they don't walk over people to come to the front. Okay? He said that if they do come, they have to sit where they find a place. And he said this, he didn't care this was Harun al-Rashid, the Caliph. This is how knowledge is sought. Okay, if you really are serious about learning, then you have to learn the etiquettes of learning, and this is from the etiquettes of knowledge that you come and take knowledge, and you sit where you find place. You don't say, "Oh, I'm important. I'm a VIP. I have to come." This is a fitna in our time. People, even when a lot of the time we go to a lot of mosques, people, they reserve their places. Oh, this is my place, by the way. Okay, and this is wrong. People should not reserve places. When you come, if you were sitting at the front row and then you went out and you came back, sit at the back. Don't say this was my place. This was your place, but it's taken by somebody else now. One of the things that was different with Malik from Abu Hanifa is Abu Hanifa, he encouraged his student to contribute in the discussion. Okay, so Imam Abu Hanifa would discuss and allow the students to express their opinion. Imam Malik's way wasn't the same. Imam Malik mainly dictated to people, and the people just made notes. One of the things that Imam Malik did not like was people coming and asking a hypothetical question. What if this happened and that happened? Okay, not that he wasn't able to answer these questions. It's because there were so many things happening anyway in Medina at that time that required new fatwa. Okay, why add to these unnecessarily? Why add to these? Whereas Abu Hanifa in their school, they were completely fine with that. But Imam Malik didn't really like that. And this is in line with the prophetic way as well, because the Prophet, he really discouraged the companions to ask too many questions. We can understand Abu Hanifa's way, but if you want to strike a balance, there are sometimes people, they ask questions which doesn't really benefit them at all, unnecessary question. I'm sure when Abu Hanifa allowed people to ask this kind of question, they didn't just allow them to ask any silly question. Like, for example, very often people ask me about the different prophets, their sons, the names of their daughters and their sons and what happened. This is not important. If it was important, then Allah would have mentioned it in the Quran. The Prophet would have mentioned it. Or what was the name of the donkey of Uzair? Okay? This is not knowledge that benefits. Okay, but having said that, Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi, some of his students, what they used to do is they would get, if they really wanted to know the answer to a hypothetical question, obviously the question they asked was a serious question, and things which could possibly happen, and they knew that their sheikh didn't really like answering this kind of question, so they would get someone who's not from the student of Malik, and then they would send that person to Malik ibn Anas, and they would ask the question on behalf of them, and that way they would get some of the answers that they wanted to get, because they couldn't ask these questions directly. Yeah. Imam Malik radiallahu anhu, in terms of his livelihood, and this is the case with all of the Imams, they did not depend on people for money, for wealth. They earned their own livelihood. Abu Hanifa earned his own livelihood. Likewise Malik ibn Anas, and the same we can say about other people. Today, people think that if you become a pious person, if you become a scholar, then you have to just depend on other people's help. No, that's not the case. That's not the way of our predecessors. Malik ibn Anas, while he was seeking knowledge, obviously his father had his own trade. He was helping one of his brother who was a silk merchant. So he took part in that as well. And he had his own personal wealth as well. It's not that people came and they gave him money and he didn't do anything. He had his own earning, he had his own trade, and there was income coming. In terms of his usul, his way, the principle on which he based his fatwa, and I don't know if that was discussed in Abu Hanifa, just mention it, we don't need to really explain these. First of all, if you wanted to find the solution to a problem, you would look in the Book of Allah, the Quran. If it's not in the Book of Allah, then you look at the Sunnah. If it's not in the Sunnah, then you look at the consensus, the Ijma'. Okay? And then Ijma' of Ahlul Medina, Ijma' of the people of Medina, the consensus of the people of Medina. Then you will go to Qiyas. Then you will go to this, you look at the individual statement of companions. Then he had al-maslaha, al-mursala, public welfare, taking into consideration public welfare. And then he had al-istihsan, al-istishab, equity. Al-istishab is continuity of you know, it doesn't, I just keep mentioning this, you don't need to go so much. Sadd al-dhara'i, blocking the means, al-urf, the cultural norm. So these are some of these the usul that have been listed by the people who looked into the methodology of Malik. None of the imams actually wrote down that this is my usul, this is how I derive ruling, but this is what the students of these people, and these have been mentioned by one of the Malik is called Imam al-Qarafi, that these are his principles, or these are his usul on which he bases his fatwa. A lot of the work of Imam Malik, and in fact Imam Malik of his Muwatta is amazing. You have different riwayat of the Muwatta. Okay, many people took from him the Muwatta. It's not just one person, many different people came and went, and he taught it. And one of the things that he did with the Muwatta, he was continuously editing it. For 40 years he was doing that, and that's why different people came at different times, and there are some variations, there are some hadiths which are not there, and then in some other riwayat they're there. The most famous Muwatta that we are familiar with is the Muwatta with Yahya ibn Kathir al-Andalusi. He was not one of the best narrators of Muwatta, best meaning that there are other people who are better than him. But this is the Muwatta that's reached us, and this is and when I say then some of you might be wondering if Imam Malik had actually written down the Muwatta, why is it that there's different people having different versions? Is that Imam Malik had his own copy. It's not that he printed it and he published it and he gave out copies. It never happened like that. People used to come and note down. So the original copy that he had, he was always editing it. He was always making adjustment to it. And the Muwatta contains the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. It contains the statements of the companions, the fatwa of the companions. It contains the fatwa of different scholars. Even it contains his own opinion. Imam Malik, despite being a very famous Imam, and despite having being loved by all people, the normal people, the Khulafa even had extreme love for him and respect, he had to face trials and tribulation. And this happened with Abu Hanifa, happened with Malik, and it happened also with Ahmad bin Hanbal. You later find out as well, he suffered a great deal. So what happened with Imam Malik? You know, we know that he was highly respected by the Khulafa. Okay, and they would take his advice, they would consult him. In fact, when I actually looked into the matter, there isn't any people have different opinion with regards to what really happened. He was punished by the rulers, by the governor of Medina. I think his name was Jafar ibn Sulaiman. And the reason, people have given different reasons. Some people say it's because he preferred Uthman over Ali, and some of the Alawis, the Shia. You know, the Alawis, they were very close to the Abbasid anyway. The Abbasid movement and the Alawi movement, they collaborated with each other in order to get rid of the Ubayyad. Because one of the Shia, the slogan of the Abbasid was Al-Bay'atu li Ali Bayti Rasulillah. They asked for bay'ah for the household of the Prophet, because Abdullah ibn Abbas and Al-Abbasid were there from the household of the Prophet. So some people say it was because of that, but it wasn't even because of that. After looking into this, I come across this opinion. People say there was one particular hadith that Imam Malik used to narrate, and the ruling elite, they took offense because they thought that he was actually preaching against them, and they wanted him to stop. The hadith is basically that if somebody is forced to make a pledge, then he is not required from them to fulfill that pledge. He's been forced on it. I think the hadith is mustakrahin yaminun, and that's what the wording of the hadith is. And obviously these khulafa, they used to forcefully take the bay'ah. They used to go and force people to give bay'ah, pledge of allegiance to them. So and some people were using this narration against these people. And Malik was being blamed that he is inciting the people against them. Some of you might be wondering that, you know, if it's not a big deal, he could have just remained silent. Why didn't you just do that? You have to understand this properly. From the perspective of the Khulafa, they were thinking that Malik was using this hadith against them. But Malik felt that this is a prophetic hadith, this is a statement of the hadith which he felt was a duty upon him to narrate. And it is haram, it is not permissible for a person to conceal knowledge. And if he did not narrate this hadith, then he will be concealing knowledge which has reached to him from the Prophet ﷺ. So he felt that it was his duty to narrate this hadith. He wasn't narrating the hadith in order to incite people against anyone. In fact, I think he was narrating this hadith in relation to talaq, right? But he was tortured, he was lashed, and he was brutally lashed, and he was injured. His arms were quite, he couldn't raise his hands afterwards properly. I know some people say that Imam Malik, the reason why the Malikis, they leave their hands on the side is because of that. That's not the reason. That's one, I just want to clarify that. Imam Malik, and there is evidence that of leaving the hand on the side during the prayer. Imam Malik, Ibn al-Qasim narrates in the Mudawwana from Imam Malik that he preferred that the hands be left on the side during the first prayer. However, during the non-obligatory prayer, he recommended people to place the hand over the right hand, just like the rest of the Mazahib do. And there are narration obviously back to the Prophet. I just wanted to mention that because very often when people narrate the persecution of Malik, right, and there's the pain and suffering they have to go through, they think that he couldn't move his hand, and that's why in the Maliki Mazhab you leave the hand to the side. That's wrong. That's not true. How long do I have? I'll finish inshallah. Imam Malik, he came from a very pious family. One of the things that I forgot to mention is his mother Aliyah bint Shuraik, I think, al-Azdiya. When Imam Malik made his intention known, when he told his mother that he wants to go and seek knowledge, she encouraged him. In fact, she dressed him up. This is how the mother was. She encouraged him, and she basically asked him to go and learn until he became the leader in knowledge. He became the best among them. So she encouraged Imam Malik radiallahu anhu to go and seek knowledge. Imagine if today, when a son says, I want to go and study, mothers probably, they would weep and whatever, or they would probably say, why do you want to do this? But this is Imam Malik, she not only did she encourage him, but she also dressed him up, go and seek, and then become, and also one of the things that she taught him is that one of the teachers, I can't remember who it was, he said when you go to him, learn from his adab before you learn from his knowledge. And that is something very important. We pay less importance to adab these days. Adab is not important, etiquette is not important. Okay, this adab, learning morals and manners has been part of our Islamic curriculum for a long time. Now, because we know we're living in a different time where knowledge is sought not for spiritual purpose, not for practice, but for academic purpose. We have a lot of information, we can narrate hadith, we can impress people with our knowledge. That's the purpose with a lot of people today. They learn in order to impress people. But in the past, the people, they learned in order to practice. The main objective of learning was practice. This was the main objective of Abu Hanifa and Malik. Abu Hanifa did not seek knowledge so that he became Imam al-Azam and people would respect him and they will mention his name in the minbar. No, they sought knowledge in order to practice this knowledge, in order to benefit themselves and benefit others. But now people seek knowledge in order to gain fame, become famous, so people respect them. And if people don't call them Sheikh, they become upset. If people don't look at them in a certain way, they become upset. This is not from the way of our early scholars. There is a hadith, I'll finish in 2 minutes inshallah. There is a hadith that all of us are familiar with. One of the signs of the end of time is that ignorance will prevail and knowledge will decrease. Knowledge will decrease doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take away the knowledge. Another hadith explains that Allah will take away the scholars. And one of the other things that one of our teachers, they explained that many of the ulama, they explain this hadith by saying that there will be knowledge, but ignorance will prevail here means that people will not act on the knowledge. And a person, if a person seeks knowledge and he does not act on that knowledge, then he is jahil. He is ignorant. He is still ignorant. Okay, a person becomes a knowledgeable person when he learns and then he practices it and then he benefits others with it. Imam Malik rahimahullah, he lived a very long life. He lived a very long life. And like I said, many people came and benefited from him. And he eventually passed away in the morning of 13th of Rabi al-Awwal, the year 179. And this was during the reign of Harun al-Rashid. And I will stop here, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Abdul Malik. Does anyone have any questions?
So I think it's probably a good point to, if you don't mind, just to share the story of when I think a traveller came to him and asked him about 40 questions.
Yeah, this is something. Yeah, this is something that I wanted to mention, but just didn't cross my mind at the time. You know, today everybody wants to give fatwa. They're so busy. Before a person asks them the question, they want to give the answer. There's so much in a rush. And this is one of the fitna that many people who are students, they suffer from. They want to learn, so they want to, because they want to give fatwa. And one of the things that our teacher Sheikh Akram says that it's quite unfortunate that in some of the institutions, he didn't start putting it, you have fatwa degrees. So you learn to give fatwa and then you become mufti. In the past, you didn't have any kind of such training. You don't train to become a mufti. There was no training to become mufti because that is not the objective of knowledge. The objective of knowledge is action. Okay, Imam Malik, somebody came to Imam Malik from Iraq to Medina al-Munawwara. In those days, they didn't have aeroplanes, cars, trains, whatever. He traveled from very far away place to Iraq and asked him. He came with 40 questions, and these questions were probably given to him by the people of Iraq. It's not that individual who came to him with the question, but it's from the people of Iraq. 40 questions after traveling such a long distance. Imam Malik radiallahu anhu only answered 3. Right? And the rest, 37, he didn't answer. And the person said, Anta Malik ibn Anas. Are you Malik ibn Anas? Now he's like having doubts. Are you Malik? He was well known in the Islamic lands, Muslim, the Imam Malik, the Imam of Medina, the Alim of Darul Hijrah. Are you that person? Okay, I come to you from Iraq and you only know 3 answers to 3 questions. Now what did Malik say? Did he become embarrassed? Did he say, okay, stay with me for a year, I'll find the answer to these questions? Okay, and this is what some people might do today. Oh, that's so embarrassing. Somebody just put me on the spot and I couldn't answer these questions. So what did he say? He said, irkab rahilatak. Get on your horseback. Izhab, fazhab, wa qul liman arsalak. Innani wajadtu Malik ibn Anas la ya'rifu fi al-ilmi shay'a. So go and tell the people who sent you that I found Malik ibn Anas who knows nothing. I found Malik, he was brave, he had the courage to say that I don't know. Today we don't have that courage. Even when we don't know, we claim that we know. We want to tell people that we know something that we don't know. Is there any other question? Any other question? That's what you were referring to, wasn't it? Yeah. And this is from the humility of these people. And that's why the scholars, they say, to say I don't know when you don't know is half of knowledge. And I remember some of the students, they were asking the teachers when we were studying Arabic in France, Ustad, if we don't know the answer to a question, can we say I don't know and get half a mark? I said no. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? No, that's fine.
Again, Jazakumullah khair, Brother Abdul Malik Sheikh. Inshallah, we'll see you soon again in this circle. Inshallah, next week we'll be carrying on with our series on the life of the Prophet with Muhammad Abul Kalam, and that will be after Maghrib. Subhanakallah wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum.